Welcome everyone to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host for the evening, Kevin Reed, and I am also super excited about this episode. I am so happy to talk about one of my top three favorite films of all time. I watched this movie when I was 6, 7 years old, and it has never aged. It hasn't dated. It's dated, but I can watch it right now and still have the same joy and intrigue that I had back in 1985 when this film came out. The day was February the 15th, 1985, and a film was released in theaters that I didn't know what I was going to see. I went with my sisters. They were older. Um, like I said, I was 5, 6 years old, so I definitely didn't know what I was looking at. But I wanted to see Indiana Jones. I wanted to see action. I wanted to see, some adventure films and stuff like that. But I went to the theater with my sisters to go see a film about five teenagers who on a Saturday were stuck in detention and didn't leave a library all day long. That was it. There was no action set pieces. There were no big, gigantic, beautiful set designs and, different locations that they traveled through. It was one simple location in a school, five students, and a vice principal and a janitor. That's it. It was seven people in this movie. And it felt like a big budget blockbuster film. And it still holds up to this very day. 40 years later, it is none other than John Hughes, The Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club is a film that, for an era of films, the 80s, where it was just throw stuff against the wall, see what stick type of era. This is a movie that exceeds everybody's expectation. I don't care if you were young, old, black, white, and whatever the case may be. This movie touched you in some strange way, and not in a strange way, but it was just something that left an impact in some shape, form, or fashion. I don't care if it was for the comedy. I don't care if it was for the drama aspect of it, or one of the characters that you can relate to, or a character that you probably know, somebody that you know. And that was the takeaway from this film. It was somebody, either you or somebody you knew was stuck in that library, was stuck in detention that day. And so I couldn't believe, when I rewatched it for this show, how much I still enjoy this movie. You can watch a movie 50 times, and after a while, whether it's your favorite movie or not, after a while, it kind of gets old. You kind of get bored with certain scenes, or like, okay, I know what that scene is. You wish you could skip through it. Probably can't skip through it if you're still watching Blu-rays and whatnot, physical media, shout out. But, you just want to get to your favorite part because everything about this movie. You can recite every line of dialogue. You know what scene is coming up. Oh, this is the part when they're running down the hallway, or so on and so forth. This movie doesn't do that. This movie still right now, even though I know what's about to happen, even though I know what lines of dialogue is about to be spoken, it still keeps me interested. It still keeps me intrigued 40 years later. This is the sheer definition, in my humble opinion, of a masterpiece. This was a masterpiece, all from the mind of one of the greatest storytellers I think, to ever be a part of the film industry. This man had his hands in some of the funniest movies of all time, at least in the 80s. In that era, in the decade of the 80s, John Hughes owned that decade. I mean, absolutely owned it. And before that, you can go back before he got into film with him working at National Lampoons at the magazine. He wrote jokes for Rodney Dangerfield and other comedians. He did so much in the entertainment industry. The guy was phenomenal. I mean, here's just a list of some. Well, I'm gonna list them all because all of them are. They have classic elements to it. If they're not classics, Mr. Mom, he wrote that. The National Lampoon's Vacation, he wrote that. 16 Candles, yes, he wrote and directed that. In the same year, that's when we got The Breakfast Club. Well, actually, 16 Candles came out in '84. The very next year, this is when The Breakfast Club came out. Then he also wrote National Lampoon's European Vacation, Weird Science, the dumbest movie ever, but for some strange reason, the greatest dumb movie ever. I don't know why. Love that movie as well. Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, um, Some Kind of Wonderful, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is a Thanksgiving classic that many people uh, religiously watch every year for Thanksgiving. She's Having a Baby, The Great Outdoors, Uncle Buck, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Get this. He wrote, a lot of people don't know this. He wrote Home Alone. Yes. Beethoven, Home Alone 2, Dennis the Menace, the movie that came out in 1993. He wrote that as well. The man was an icon. He truly was an icon, a legend, just one of my personal heroes when it comes to film. Unfortunately, he passed away at the young age of 59 in 2009. And man, you want to talk about just a phenomenal talent. It's been reported on a whole bunch of sites and videos that I watched about him, documentaries, I should say, that he was so talented. He can write a screenplay in 2 to 3 days, a complete movie in 2 to 3 days. To put that in perspective, I've been trying to write a screenplay for the better part of 20 years. The same story. I've been trying to write it for 20 years and can't crack it. He can bounce it out in 2 to 3 days like it's nothing. Like, okay, there you go. He was phenomenal. He was a phenomenal writer. And not to say it's super unique. I'm pretty sure there are other writers just as talented as he is, but the mere fact that he's able to do that, uh, the way he writes dialogue for different characters and keeps story beats going, and it's it's phenomenal. He is sorely missed, sorely missed. We don't get movies like this anymore. He had that touch. He truly had that touch. But another reason we don't get movies like this anymore is because we don't get a fraction or a group of individuals that Hollywood can pick from to star in their movies, young actors that just, I don't know, ruled the cineplexes in the 80s. And we know them as the Brat Pack, even though none of them care for that term. And understandably so. But there was a nickname given to these group of actors around this time. And it was just, I don't know, I guess it was a cute little thing because it was kind of a take on the Rat Pack, from the 50s and the 60s. And, that was the group. That was the group back then that ruled the world, with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and all them. Yeah, all that was good, but just the same in the 80s, we had these group of young actors that we still see on screen today, or still know who they are today. You know, Demi Moore, she just recently just got her first Academy Award nomination this year with The Substance. And that was mind boggling when I heard that. I didn't know this was her first nomination because Demi Moore has been in some really good movies and she has done exceptionally well in those movies. I'm a big fan of Demi Moore. But she was a part of the Brat Pack. Emilio Estevez is was part of it. Rob Lowe, Judd Nelson, Andrew McCartney, Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall, James Spader, Robert Downey Jr., believe it or not, was a part of that clique. John Quire, John Cusack, you know, the list goes on and on and on and on. But it is these group of young actors that right now today are prominently fixed in Hollywood, that these are the older guard, as you if you can believe it or not. You know, when I was watching The Breakfast Club and I was looking at Anthony Michael Hall, and he was the youngest one in the cast in that film, and to see him now as this old, well, older guy. I don't want to say the man old, but you know, this older gentleman. I just saw him recently. It's a trailer for something. Oh, Reacher, which comes out pretty soon. The new season of Reacher, he's in it, and I'm like, man, that's Anthony Michael Hall, you know, and he doesn't look like himself. He doesn't look like that cute little kid from The Breakfast Club. But yeah, it's good to see that they all still doing their thing in Hollywood, still making a stamp in the industry. So let's get into it. There's no point prolonging the time. Let's get into one of the greatest indie teen coming of age comedy dramedies, or what they call now a dramedy, written, produced, and directed by John Hughes. The Breakfast Club, a film that stars Emilio Estevez, Paul Gleason, Anthony Michael Hall, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, and Ali Sheedy. This film tells the story of 5 teenagers from different high school cliques who serve a Saturday detention oversaw by their authoritarian vice principal. John Hughes, he wrote this script in 1982, and he began casting the film after the release of 16 Candles in 1984. It was released by Universal Pictures on February the 15th, 1985. It grossed $51.5 million against a $1 million budget, and it earned acclaim from critics who considered it one of Hughes' most memorable and recognizable works. In 2016, The Breakfast Club was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically significant. The film has been considered one of the best films of the 1980s and one of the best teen films of all time. And I can't disagree at all with none of that claim. This film it's more than just a teen comedy. You know, when you think of teen comedies, you think of 16 Candles, you know, just an off the wall comedy, or just to keep it in John Hughes world, you know, Weird Science, which is just bananas out there, crazy comedy. This film has layers. This film has depth. This film, I don't know, man. You can say comedy, yeah, it's because there's a lot of laughs in it, but it's more drama than comedy. This film tells something. It has a story to tell. It's deeper, and it touches in, and this is back in 1985, people. Or you can go even back further to 1982 when John Hughes wrote this screenplay. That this film deals with mental health, family trauma, dealing with all that, you know, dealing with the bullying that goes on in schools, dealing with these cliques, these outside cliques And all five of these characters represents the cliques that you knew from school. And now when I saw this, I knew nothing of this. I was barely in school. I was barely in kindergarten, maybe first grade when I saw this. So this was alien to me until about 8 years later till I got to high school, and I was like, wait, this the Breakfast Club, man. That's John Bender. That's Emilio Estevez. That's Molly Ringwald character over there. They're all clicked up, in their force. They all are represented in this one film, and it's done in such a unique way. That's what makes it so beautiful. It is a social experiment. It is, of taking these five characters, different backgrounds, different classes, financial or whatever, social, whatever it is, and putting them in a room and forcing them to interact with one another in the course of one day could have easily come off as cheesy. And does this film has its cheesy moments? Of course it does. I mean, what movie don't? But it's not cheesy, overblown cheesy. It's not out of the box, out of the realm of possibility cheese. It's 80s cheese, but it's good 80s cheese. It isn't spoiled. It doesn't stink. You can actually make a grilled cheese sandwich with this cheese. So it's good cheese. Now let's go back to some history in this film. As I said, John Hughes originally wrote this screenplay in 1982. It was originally called The Lunch Bunch, but a friend of John Hughes from another school had a detention class called The Breakfast Club. And so he decided to change the name to The Breakfast Club. He thought that was cute. And I think it was better that way. I would actually, The Lunch Bunch wasn't bad, but there's something about The Breakfast Club that kind of, it pops, it pops with me. The casting of this film, Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were both cast in 16 Candles, John Hughes' previous film. And so towards the end of filming that movie, John Hughes asked them to be in The Breakfast Club. Hall became the first to be cast. He agreed to the role of the nerd, Brian, Brian Johnson. And so he agreed. His mom and his sister have a cameo in the film. They are the ones that dropped them off at the beginning of the movie and picked them up at the end from detention. That was his real life mother and sister in the car. Molly Ringwald, she was originally approached to play Allison Reynolds, but she was she was upset by that because she wanted to play Claire. And so it was a kind of a back and forth with that. And she had eventually won John Hughes over, and she got the role of Claire. When it came to the role of Allison, several young actresses auditioned for that role, which eventually went to Ali Sheedy, and she nailed it. Ali Sheedy actually almost stole the movie. Nobody really, I would say, quote unquote, stole the movie, but Ali Sheedy came very close to taking it and it being her own. That's how much I enjoyed her character. But I ask myself, when I look at these names of actresses who, now granted, at that time didn't know who they were, but when you think back now in hindsight, you're like, man, that would have been interesting. You had Robin Wright audition, Jodie Foster audition, Diane Lane, Laura Dern auditioned. Now these are all Academy Award nominated and in one case winning actresses now, and they auditioned for this role. It was highly sought out, but it eventually went to Ali Sheedy, and I think they made the right choice there. Emilio Estevez was originally going to play John Bender, believe it or not, but when John Hughes was unable to find someone to play the jocks role, Andrew Clark, he recast Emilio Estevez as Andrew Clark. One of the names considered to take the role of John Bender after they recast, moved over Emilio Estevez into the other role, which, as much as I love, and I mean absolute love, Judd Nelson, Nicolas Cage was considered for the role of John Bender. And once again, you think back in your mind's eye and you're like, my God, that's the one role that I wouldn't mind being recast. Everybody else fit their role, including Judd Nelson. But if they were going to recast Judd Nelson, Nicolas Cage as John Bender, my God, that would have been bananas crazy good. Bananas crazy good. But it wasn't so. It was narrowed down between John Cusack and Judd Nelson at the end. And of course, Judd Nelson came up with the role, and I'm not mad at it. Alan Ruck, he also auditioned for the role. He didn't get it, but he did eventually get a role in a John Hughes film in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. John Hughes originally cast Cusack, but he decided to replace him with Nelson before shooting began because Cusack didn't look intimidating enough for the role. And so, and I can see that because I don't see John Cusack as, I can see John Cusack as in the Emilio Estevez role, but not as John Bender. Now, John Cusack is an amazing actor, and I think he could have pulled it off, but I don't think, I just don't see it. I can't picture it, I just can't picture it. But I think he made the right choice in the end of it all. Rick Moranis was originally cast as the janitor. In case you don't know who Rick Moranis is, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ghostbusters. Yeah, him. He was originally cast, but he had to drop out for some reason, and it was eventually played by John Kapelos. Yeah, he took over the role, and once again, not mad at it. But let's go over this cast in this film as it's portrayed, as it's shown to us in all of his glory. Let's start with John Bender. Let's start with Judd Nelson as the one of my favorite characters in film ever. John Bender, I caught myself many a times throughout my 46 years on Earth. Well, going to be 46 years on Earth, God spare. I found myself acting like John Bender, emulating John Bender, his attitude, his personality, because I love that character so much, and I love Judd Nelson's portrayal of that character so much. The fact that he brought this, typical 80s teen rebellion, rebellious, I should say, standing up against authority, that attitude, I loved it. But when you get, at least in my case, when I got older and started really looking at the mental aspect of it all, what he was going through, and realizing that this was all basically a cover, to hide the pain and the depression and the trauma that he was going through at home with his father and his home life, is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And I'm like, well, I can't act like him. I didn't go through what he went, I didn't have those problems. But Judd Nelson's performance, looking back at it now, it's so layered and you can see it now. See, this film wasn't meant for me at that age. I'm wise enough to see that now. I've seen a lot of movies when I was that I shouldn't have seen, that I was too young to really watch, for one, and appreciate, for two, because my mind wasn't right. I wasn't mature enough to understand what was really going on in those movies. Yeah, the car and the building was blowing up and all this other stuff. But you know, there are deeper levels in film. There are mental aspects that you got to take into consideration, and deeper levels. And that's why I love film so much. Looking beyond the performance, looking past the little veil that is put up. This film was my first exposure to it, and I'm gonna get back to the actors, but I guess this is why this film sticks out to me. Why this film is a film that I consider my favorite of all time, because even though I was too young to really understand, I kind of understood it. I really can't explain. I've been trying for the past couple of days, trying to figure out a way to put it in words, but I really can't, because it just doesn't come out right. But me being 6 or 7 years old when I saw this movie, or it could have been a little older. I could have been 8. I say a little older, like I was about to say 12 or something. But yeah, it could have been 8, but it stuck. Everything stuck, and it made sense. It made sense that John Bender had a rough life. I got that when I was that age. I understood that aspect of the story. I understood the trauma that Andrew Clark was going through with his dad. Even though I didn't experience none of that in my house, I understood because of the performance. I understood what Claire was talking about. When they was in that circle and they were opening up, I understood all that at that age. And that's due to the amazing performances, the amazing script, the amazing direction. It was just, like I said, chef's kiss. But yes, Judd Nelson knocked this role out the park. I mean, can you find another character that's similar to John Bender in film throughout history? You may, for example, one of the greatest action movies of all time is Die Hard. John McClane is considered one of the greatest action heroes of all time. The character John McClane, you can pick out a John McClane in 50 other movies. There is a John McClane and 50, and I'm lowballing out of this world, 50 other movies with that character, with those character traits. Superhero movies, it doesn't make sense. That's pretty much the same formula throughout, but you get the point I'm going through. You don't find another John Bender, a John Bender that, I mean, like I said before, rough on the outside, but so damaged on the inside. I can't think of one. Now, they have characters like that, but not one depicted in this matter as far as a teenager is concerned. I've seen movies where older people, middle-aged people have those same character traits. But for a teenager to have that, and we all know now that teenagers go through this, actually younger than teenagers, that have this character trait. And this was being shown to us in 1985. That's why I kind of scratch my head when you read the news or open social media and you see all of these comments and posts about the uprise in child trauma, the uprise in child mental health issues. What uprise? It's always been here. This is, at least as long as I've been on Earth, it has always been here. It's just now you starting to get a little, I guess, because of the advent of social media and the interwebs, you get more exposure to everybody else's issues. But this has always been around. And John Hughes was trying to tell the world back in 1985. Going back into our cast, Molly Ringwald as Claire. Molly Ringwald was, I guess you can say, the 80s crush girl. Everybody loved Molly Ringwald, and I certainly did because I have a thing for redheads. That's from birth. I always remember loving redheads, and so Molly Ringwald was like the bee's knees for me, and so I loved her in this role as the princess, as the it girl, if you will, in high school, and we all know that it girl. But once again, played out so well. Got on the mask, got on this persona, like she got everything going on. She is the queen. Nothing is nothing bad other than the fact she's in detention for skipping classes, but she's just untouchable. She is the first daughter, if you will. Everything is going right in life. She has the look, she has money. I mean, men want her, women want to be her. You know what I'm saying? But we find out as this movie goes on, as we start stripping down the layers, we notice that she's damaged on the inside. The pressure that young ladies around that age, and even when they get older, the pressure to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to present themselves in a certain way. All of that is there in her opening up in that circle. Boy, in her crying down. It was, ooh, like it was amazing. Anthony Michael Hall as Brian Johnson. He was the nerd. He was the little geek in the group. Um, I liked him in his role. He had probably the softest role, and I'm saying that with all due respect. This is not a slight. He had the softest role, but yet he had probably one of the most devastating, if I can say that, because they all go through their own thing. They all have their own baggage. But in his case, he was smart. He had straight A student. He's a nerd, he's a geek. He doesn't get into trouble. He just goes to school, go home and do homework and study. Yeah, that's it. And it is go to bed and repeat that same routine the next day. Nothing different. But he messed around and got a B or a C on a test. I think it was C. And it was so devastating because he never got a C. Or he could have failed it. I can't remember. Man. And I just watched the movie. But he didn't get an A. He's used to getting A's. And he was so depressed by that. He was so hurt that he was going to devastate his parents with this grade, that he was going to commit suicide. He was going to kill himself at the school. Where they flipped it and made it kind of funny that he was going to do it. The reason he's in detention because a flare gun went off in his locker. He was going to try to kill himself with a flare with a flare gun. Anybody would say you're not going to kill yourself with a flare gun. But it was so devastating for him to have that failing grade. And I can understand. I can relate to all of these characters. That's something I should have said earlier. I can relate to everyone. It's like a piece of every character here is a part of me for one reason or other. One, because I love the movie. Other is because you can relate to him. And I certainly can. I was a nerd. Still is. Let's not mistake it. I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. But in elementary and middle school, I was on the honor roll. I was in straight A's. I was a beast when it came to the books. But I had failed a test, and the reason I failed a test because I can ace a test without study. I just knew the answers. I always knew the answers. Even now, I know the answers. But the issue was when I got to a certain grade, I'm pretty sure y'all can relate to this. You had to show your answer. You had to show how you arrived at that answer. I never could do that. I couldn't do that. I could if I would have studied, but I didn't study because I knew the answers. I felt it was a waste of time. I just knew the answer. And so I turned in the test. I was like, yeah, I aced this. And I was right. I got all the answers right. but I didn't show my work. That's what they always said. You didn't show your work, and I failed it. And it was so devastating to me. It just tore me up. I turned stupid after that. And just to try to put it plainly, I could not shake it, and I still can't to this day. The fact that I failed, how, because I can't wrap my head around the logic that I failed a test that I got every question right on. I understand that I didn't do the layout, but I just could not wrap my head around it, and I could never shake back from it. And from that moment on, my grades slipped, and I to to put it plainly, I stopped caring. Honestly, I just stopped caring because I felt I couldn't win, and that was the start of my demise in school. Even though I did make it past the finish line, thank God, but it was dragging myself. I didn't run past the finish. I had to drag myself across the finish line. But it's all on me. I don't blame nobody. I don't blame the school system and the teachers and all this other stuff. I don't get into all that. I know that it was me, but I get it. I said all that to say this. I like Anthony Michael Hall's performance as Brian in this role. Ali Sheedy as Allison. She's the basket case, or what we would consider now golf girls or whatever. Yeah, something like that. But she's in detention just to be there. She had nowhere to go. She wasn't called in detention. She's just she's just off. She's a goofy. She doesn't care about nothing. So she's in there. Ali Sheedy did a great job. I mean, for half the movie she didn't speak, but she emoted. Her performance, through her performance, she emoted, and you connected with her character. Who I left off? Oh, Emilio Estevez as Andrew Clark. I mean, it's Emilio Estevez. This he comes from royalty. Martin Sheen is his dad. Charlie Sheen is his brother. The boy can act, and he acted his behind off in this film. I think it was the right choice, switching him from John Bender to Andrew Clark, because I can see him as the athlete. He's the jock in this film or in this situation, and he's in detention because he taped another student's butt cheeks together. And so it as a prank, as a hazing thing, but something had happened, like the boy got damaged or something, he was hairy, and it kind of ripped off. When they ripped off the tape, it messed him up, and it was devastating. But he broke down his story with his dad, and how his dad is, always pressuring him to win, no matter what, you win. And, the pressure that parents put on these kids, on these young athletes. And this is the one character that I can't relate to, because I never was pressured like that as far as athletics. Even though I was good at athletics, I didn't really go at athletics as I should have, because I was told I was too short by coaches, even though I was a beast in every sport that I played. But I couldn't get on the field or the court because they felt I was too short. And they probably right. But I see players now that play football. That's my height. I was get back to the movie, but I got to tell this because it still to this day kills me. If you're into football and players and whatnot, there's a player that used to play for the New Orleans Saints years ago called his name is Darren Sproles. Darren Sproles was a running back, and he was also a punt returner and whatnot. Real good player. He ended up leaving the Saints and going to Philly, I think, to the Eagles and other places. But anyways, me and my family, we went out to eat one night, and my daughter had she was walking up to the door to this restaurant, and all who comes out the restaurant with his wife or significant other but Darren Sproles. And Darren Sproles opened the door for my daughter. I was like, that's cute, you know. And I was about to shake his hand. I was like, all right, who that? Darren Sproles, you know. And then when I got up the steps and I was level with him, and I looked, and I'm like 2 inches or 3 inches taller than him, my heart dropped into my stomach. And I was like, wait, they told me I was too short to play football in high school. This dude's in the NFL. I'm taller than him. I was devastated. That tore me up. That tore me up. To this day, I can't believe it. I was looking down at the floor. I'm like, is this unlevel or something? Are we on a slant? I'm like, this cannot be accurate. Because he looked short on the field. I knew he was short. He looked short on the football field on TV, but in person, he's really short. I'm like, oh my God. And if anybody knows me, you know that I'm 5 foot nothing. And so it's like, how in the world did this dude get to the NFL? But my hat goes off to him. I celebrate his success. I'm glad. But there are other players that's around that height too that have played in the NFL. And it kind of makes me mad that I wasn't given the chance. But that's neither here nor there. But Emilio Estevez, he put in a powerful performance. One of the greatest scenes in this film is the sit-around therapy session that these characters have, where they're opening up about their family life and what they go through, the trauma they go through at home with their parents and whatnot. Powerful performance all the way around. Everybody is given something to chew on. Everybody ate in this scene. Amazing scene in this film. The comedy in this film was top notch. Amazing. John Bender, Judd Nelson as this character was hilarious. And what made his character funny, he was funny without trying to be funny. He wasn't the comedian. He wasn't the comic relief in this film, but he was just funny. And everybody had a funny little line or two. They had a funny little scene or two. But John Bender was funny without being funny. And that's why I enjoyed his character so much. The back and forth between him and the vice principal, played by Paul Gleason. He plays Mr. Vernon. Man, I liked his character too, because honestly, his portrayal of the vice principal is beat by beat a disciplinarian that I had in middle school. They were the same person, because I got in trouble a lot in middle school. So me and him had a lot of interactions. And so he is beat for beat with Mr. Vernon. And I was like, man, that was a Academy Award performance that wasn't recognized, because he nailed it. I don't know if Paul Gleason followed around Mr. I can't even think his name now, from my old middle school, but man, he had his whole persona down packed. The trolling the halls scene when they were going to the locker to get the weed, and I don't know, man. I don't know why this scene is so iconic to me. Them just walking down the hall, sneaking through the halls when they weren't supposed to leave out of that library, and going on this quote unquote adventure was just an amazing scene. And when Mr. Vernon he has left his office to go to the bathroom. Now he's leaving the bathroom. So now they got to dodge through the halls so they won't get caught. They almost get caught, and they do that power slide. All of them do that power slide where they hit the brakes and this newly waxed floor, they're sliding. And just to reverse and go back up the way they came was hilarious. And John Bender sacrificing himself in layman's terms, so the rest of the kids can get back to the library without being detected, was awesome. I mean, think about it. This is the most selfish, at least this is what we led to believe when this film opened. He's the most selfish, don't care about nobody else person out of this group. But he was willing to take the hit for everybody, um, in order for them not to get in trouble. And that was the first real crack into this character that he is not really the bad guy. He is not as bad as we thought he is. Yeah, he is bad. He's not bad. He's rebellious. He's a teenager. He's a teenage boy. And so that's what it was. But it was a cool scene with him confronting Mr. Vernon in the basketball court, which led to their epic confrontation when he got back to the library and uh, adding days to his quote unquote sentence in detention, where he pretty much ended at 2 months. I think every Saturday for the next 2 months he is in detention. But one of the things that makes this such an appealing film, such an achievement in film, was the way that this group, who, when they entered this detention, when they arrived at this school that Saturday morning, they couldn't have been further apart from one another than they were. They all come from different backgrounds. They hang with different people. But by the end of this movie, they were the closest the closest bond that you can think of. And it was rightfully earned. They weren't put together just to be together. For example, when this film opened, like every other movie trope, you figured, okay, there's 3 boys, 2 girls. We see 2 couples coming out of this without a doubt. Somebody's gonna be the odd man out, which it ended up being the nerd, Brian, Anthony Michael Hall's character. But you kind of knew who was gonna end up with who, but yet it flipped it. See, I thought that John Bender would have ended up with Allison because they're kind of compatible, the way the movie starts. And you figured that the jock would end up with the prissy little rich girl. That makes sense, right? That's your normal movie trope. But this movie flipped it. And John Bender, the criminal, if you will, ended up with the princess. The athlete, the star jock of the school, ended up with the outsider chick. And it was a beautiful transition into that. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was earned. And you believe that, you kind of felt bad for Brian because he didn't have them. But what he did earn, he didn't get a love or spooky, but he did get a refresh, a renewing of the mind, his love for his academics, I guess you could say. If there's anything, I'm fishing, I'm searching, but you get where I'm coming from. I thought that was a very good trend breaker in film for that time, and even going forward, now movies still follow the trope. If that movie was made today, John Bender would have ended up with Allison, and Andrew would have ended up with Claire, and you can't tell me anything different. But John Hughes did it right. He called it perfectly. The main themes of this film is basically the constant struggle of the American teenager to be understood. And that's the one thing that all teenagers, we've all been teenagers, or if you are listening, you are a teenager. You just want to be understood. You feel like you're not. You feel a kid feels like, or a teenager, what we're talking about, teenagers feel like they're misunderstood by adults, and they're misunderstood by teenagers themselves. Like, nobody understands them. Nobody knows where they're coming from. This is a universal thing. Every teenager goes through this. Every little teenager experiences this, and they feel like they're the only one. And that's what's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because thank God my kids are out of the teenage years, because it was, my God. I used to tell them all the time, I pray that I wasn't like this when I was a teenager. I don't remember being this depressed. I mean, they always felt like nobody knows what they're going through. And when you express that, yes, I know what you're going through. No, these are different times. You don't know. No, baby, we've been through this. It's the same thing. It's nothing but a rerun. It's the same thing. No, you don't get it. It's different times now. It's just, oh my God, I'm so happy it's over. I'm so happy they grew out of that. For the most part. For the most part. I mean, it isn't like they're 30 years removed from teenagers. They're in their early 20s. So it's still remnants of that dare now, but it isn't as bad as it used to be. But this film really does tackle the struggle of that in this unique fashion, and it also explores the pressure put on teenagers to fit in into their own little circles in high school social constructs. Are you a jock? Are you one of the athletes? Are you a nerd? Are you in the little geek squad or the it crowd or the outsider crew and so on and so forth? I mean, where do you fit in? And this is around when you're a teenager. This is where you're trying to figure out who you are. And to be 100% honest with you, teenagers, like, once again, if any of you are listening, teenagers, you really don't know who you are, and what you all about until you get into your 20s. And I'm talking deep into your 20s. At least it was for me and a lot of people I know. You really don't find yourself or know what you all about until you get a little older. Teenagers are just teens. You still a kid. You still a kid, but we put a lot of pressure, at least we did put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we were kids, as if this is it, like friends that we find in high school. These are our friends forever. Be honest with yourself. To my older, seasoned audience here, how many of them friends you still talk to now? How many of those friends are still around? I had one of my besties, man. I mean, best friend to the end, all through middle school, all through high school. We used to talk about when we get older, we're going to, no matter what we do, we're going to live close to each other. We're going to do this, go on vacation, our families together, and all this here, all this. I mean, we did everything together growing up. Don't know where he's at. We're friends on Facebook. We see each other through Facebook, and every now and then we'll talk to each other on Facebook, but that's it. It's not, we're not that close anymore. And it's not that we don't like each other or we had a falling out. We just grew apart. He went this way, I went that way, and not in bad ways. It ain't like he went down the dark path and I went to the light. It was just, he went his direction, I went mine, and he's doing good from what I can see. So God bless him. I'm happy for that. And I think I ain't doing too bad for myself. So we still good, but we're not close like we were in high school. And it's not just him. A whole lot of associates that I knew in high school, I couldn't pick them out of a lineup right now, and they probably couldn't pick me out of a lineup right now. It's just crazy that way. When you're a kid, you think you're going to be friends forever. Just same thing when you find your first little love, your first kiss, your first rub up against, your first, well, you think that's the love of your life. Y'all going to get married. Y'all going to have about 3 or 4 puppies. Y'all just going to be together forever. You probably don't even know where she is right now. You probably don't know where he is right now. Now, there's some lucky fews that survive and are still together, i.e. me. I met my wife in high school. It wasn't until the last year of high school when we finally got a class together. Um, that's, and that's when we started talking. We went through 4 years of high school. Well, 3.5 years of high school, and never said one word to each other until the last year, senior year, when we finally had a class together and we were sitting next to each other. And as they say, the rest is history. We're still together today. So yeah, it's rare. It's very rare. And now I know there are some days that she probably feels like, my God, I wish I would have sat on the other side of the classroom. None of this would have. I wouldn't have went through all of this. And I'm sorry. I mean, that was the only seat left. My bad. But in any event, yeah, it's very rare that you get that. But in high school, high school is you think things are gonna last forever. Relationship and friends are gonna last forever, but they don't. Um, this movie also tackled that common thought that on the surface, students have little in common with one another. They come from different walks of life. They are different races, different creeds, different spiritual beliefs, or none at all. You think that they have nothing in common, all of these kids, all of these different personalities, but eventually they bond over a common thing. And in this film, they bond over peer pressure, and they bonded over parental experiences. And by the end, they were pretty much carbon copies of one another. Like I said, to start this movie, these five characters couldn't have been more distant away from one another than, I don't know, a man on the moon. But at the end of this film, when they're walking out of detention, walking down the hallway together, you if you close your eyes and just listen to them talk, they're all the same person. And it was depicted beautifully by the fact that the vice principal wanted them all to write an essay on why are they here, and whatever the case may be. And they didn't all write it. Only one person wrote it, but he spoke for everybody, and they all had that same voice. And as the voiceover is going over, because Brian is the one who wrote it, of course, because he's the nerd in the group. But when they all signed off at the end, they all had their own voice, and it's like, mwah, chef's kiss. And so it did a great job of depicting that theme, that common trope. It also tackled stereotyping. Stereotyping was another theme throughout this film. Once the obvious stereotypes that we touched in on, they broke down, the characters empathized with one another's struggle. They dismissed some of the inaccuracies in their first impressions, that oh, he's a criminal, oh, she's stuck up, oh, he's just a meathead, or he's just a nerd, or she's just a goofball, or whatever the case may be. That was their first impressions, but they discovered that they are more similar than different, and like I was saying before. And I'm telling you, this movie goes deep. This movie goes super deep in those themes, which is why I feel this is a perfect movie. There are just a few movies that I would consider perfect, that I would consider masterpieces, that I would consider A+. It's hard for me to think of them because it's so few. I know The Godfather, Back to the Future, and the only other one that I can lump up in that category is The Breakfast Club. And it's really funny to me that I never hear now, the circles y'all travel in, you probably hear that The Breakfast Club is one of the greatest movies of all time. Good. That's good that it's getting its flowers somewhere, but I don't hear it. Like you hear all of these mainstream big budget movies, these with the big stars and the big time directors and whatnot. All those movies have their place. All of them are great in their own way, but acknowledge the greatness of this film and what it explores and what story it is telling and how it was told in such an intelligent, funny, heartfelt, tragic way, even. The Breakfast Club, in my humble opinion, is one of the greatest films of all time. Not the greatest 80s film, not the greatest comedy, not the greatest John Hughes film. This is one of the greatest films of all time. The Breakfast Club, which was released in 1985, 40 years ago. Oh my God, I'm old. It gets a letter grade of an A plus. Great, one of the greatest movies of all time. And I am this is the film that I can really sit back and say I was there. I seen this in the theater. There's a lot of movies that came out around this time that I didn't get to see in the theater. Like I said, I was still a little right. I wasn't ready to get plucked off the tree, but I did manage to see some at home. But as far as the theater is concerned, I've never been so happy that I went to the theater to see this with my sisters, because I had to go. I didn't ask to go see the Breakfast Club. I didn't know what it was. What is this? But when my sisters went to the movies, I had to go because I was the little brother, and that was to keep them out of mischief, if you will. So I was the third wheel, and I was happy to be the third wheel for this film. Not so much for Desperately Seeking Susan, which I had to go see with my sisters one time. And my God, you talk about depressed. Quick little story. We went to go see that, and I had a choice. And I think I told this stupid story before, but it's traumatized, and so I got to keep telling. It was my two sisters and my brother, and of course me. We were going to the movies. My sisters wanted to see Desperately Seeking Susan, which starred Roxanne Arquette, I think, or Patricia. I forgot which Arquette it was. But anyway, her and Madonna. And that was the big deal because Madonna was in the movie. I think this was her first movie. And so it was that. My brother, of course, did not want to see that. And so he went to go see Beverly Hills Cop. And I could have went with him. But I chose to go with my sisters because my sisters, they had a good batting average around that time. Like I said, it was the Breakfast Club. I think we had went to go see they took me to go see E.T. They took me to go see Short Circuit around this time. This was all around this time. And so I'm like, well, they haven't been wrong before. I'm going to go with them. I don't know anything about Beverly Hills Cop, He can go by himself. Biggest mistake of my life. That was the worst. That was the first worst experience I ever had at a movie theater. I was like, man, this movie is so stupid. And I still feel that way to this day. I have yet, and honest to God, true, I have yet to watch that movie again. That's how bad it was for me. Whenever that movie came out, I don't even remember the date, but it had to be around 84. It had to be around this time because it was about 84, 85 because Beverly Hills Cop came out in 84. So it had to be around this time. But anyways, they redeemed it with the Breakfast Club. But I would like to know, do you remember the Breakfast Club? How did you feel about it? Do you hold it in as high esteem that I do? Or do you feel it was all right? It was just an 80s movie. I mean, look, film is subjective. I don't expect everybody to love this movie like I do, but I expect some of y'all to. I would love to know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for this show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to Movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Breakfast Club. Everybody, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone, and don't you forget about me.